provision of safe water and sanitation, protection of children with special needs with regard to their health and hygiene, and on the taking of immediate steps when there is a threat of an epidemic outbreak. Through our quality assurance and standards team, Mr. Speaker, we continually and regularly monitor compliance with the requirements of the manual. To a large extent, Mr. Speaker, most of our schools comply with the requisite safety standards. There are, however, cases where there is non-compliance. And because of this non-compliance, Mr. Speaker, we have commissioned a national audit of all our boarding schools to assess their compliance with the safety standards manual. The audit will identify cases of non-compliance and the consequent action to be taken against the affected schools. The audit will also show us where our officers have failed so that appropriate action is taken. Going forward, Mr. Speaker, we want to strengthen the school safety framework, and with your support, we will elevate the provisions of the safety standards manual to a binding legal status with criminal sanctions for those who fail to comply or ensure compliance. Mr. Speaker, there have also been a number of cases of deliberate fires related to unrest in schools. Since January 2024, Mr. Speaker, to 16th of September 2024, there have been 106 fire incidents in our schools, with 35,000 of these occurring during this third term. The fires are mainly targeted dormitories, and the total cases of unrest in schools since the beginning of 2024 now stand at 238. The cases of unrest have been informed by a number of causes, ranging from strained relationships or poor communication between school administrators and students. There is also peer pressure, interference by local communities, fear of examinations and anxiety, drug and alcohol abuse, and general indiscipline. Each incident is investigated, Mr. Speaker, and dealt with according to the attendant circumstances. However, generally we have adopted a multi-stakeholder approach involving the local leadership and the surrounding community to address these challenges. In order to deal with the criminal aspects of these incidents, we have committed to work with the criminal justice system to ensure that appropriate action is taken to punish those that destroy property and cause loss of life through acts of arson and intentional destruction of property. Mr. Speaker, we trust that the foregoing information adequately addresses the issues at hand, and we thank you, and I submit.
Thank you, CS. Before I open up to members to ask you a question, at paragraph 4, you say a total of 124,364 students out of 138,535 that were placed have reported to their respective universities. Where are the remaining 14,171? If you can note, that is my small concern. We'll start with the member who caused us to get to where we are, Naisula. That was your statement that spiraled into this.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the CS for his detailed report. I must say that having listened to him and having looked at the report, it looks like they self-critiqued more. And I thank you also, Mr. Speaker, for the Kamukunji, because it enabled us to comb through these very important issues. Actually, one of my first question was the 14,000 students that have not reported, so that we can understand whether it is still related to this new funding model. And Mr. Speaker, even as he prepares to answer this question, we might need a detailed report later, because sometimes you might find that the students also moved from one institution to the other and all that. I think we can follow up later to know exactly why these 14,000 students did not report to school. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we will need to know, maybe he might not have the answer right now, how many students have appealed, just so that we know whether the system is placing the students correctly. Because if we have too many appeals, it means it's not placing them correctly in the correct band. So far, it would be important to know how many students have appealed, and it is good that now you have the recategorization later in case something happens to the students. Lastly, I want to ask whether the private universities are benefiting from this new higher education funding model, and the whole issue of capitation, Mr. CS. I sit in the PEAK Public Investment Committee on Education and Governance and Education. And one of the issues that arises from all our higher institutions, our higher learning institutions, is the issue of capitation. We budget here, we pass it in Parliament, the exchequer is not released to these institutions. From what you have reported here, it seems the government will carry the burden of paying most of the school fees for these children. Meaning the burden of releasing exchequer and capitation again has come back to you, who does not release exchequer to these higher education institutions. You have seen the lecturers are now, they want to strike. You have seen the infrastructure in our institutions. I want you to tell us as a house how you will ensure, as the cabinet secretary, that these monies for these students will be released to institutions on time, so that we don't cripple our institutions, and these students also do not fall out of school. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, although it was not my question, I just want to put it to the CS that I think on these matters of the fires, we are a reactionary country. And even as the CS, I am aware that in my own county and constituency, the whole last week and 2 weeks, there's been what you're saying, they're running around the education board trying to assess the schools. Why can't this be a continuous process, so that it is not when a tragedy like the one that happens, is when you're running around to do what those education officers should have been doing on a continuous process?
So I allowed her that latitude because she's the one who raised the issue. The rest of the members try and seek one clarification or ask one question. And the minister, we can take, apart from Naisula, let's take 4 more. Then you respond, and we'll take another round thereafter. Rindikiri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I remember when the PS appeared, I did ask that the ministry supply us or submit the data on the funding per bird for each constituency. I did that, Mr. Speaker, because almost like 90% of the students from my constituency are in bird 3 and 4. And given the geography of my constituency, I think I felt it's not fair. That's why I needed to know, because there was the issue of marginalization, the social considerations, which we felt that they were disadvantaging some sectors. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, that is just a communication, because we had agreed the other time there was availability of information at the ministry education officers at the grassroots, at the sub-county offices. Mr. Speaker, there is a total lapse, and that time we noted that, and I thought the minister would address that, because some of the things that we are doing as members of parliament is what the members of the county education officers should be doing at the constituency and the county level. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Clive?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I would like to take the CS to my question be on page 15 of his presentation. On the 6th question, on the steps the ministry has taken to amalgamate the multiple education bursary funds into a single fund under the Ministry of Education.
On page? That's
15.
Yes.
Education to cater for free education,
yes,
especially higher education. On paragraph 50, in this regard, he says they have developed a basic education bursary and scholarships bill, establish a bursary and scholarship fund to coordinate and administer scholarships and bursaries in basic education. So that will be to give bursaries and scholarship. Also, the following one is to have also developed the tertiary education placement and funding bill. So if you look at the two, and paragraph 47, which talks about free, but paragraph 50 and 51 talks about bursary and scholarship. How free is that? Are we talking about free, or are we talking about bursaries and scholarship, which is a continuation of what we are doing currently? Also, on the same, if we are going to say we are going to provide free education, the CS has said that in secondary school, 70% of the students are in day schools. Do they realize, does the ministry realize that while you say free, every parent will see an avenue for having free food and free accommodation, and therefore will have an influx into boarding schools? An act that will be welcomed by head of institutions, because this will attract more capitation, and as such, that will make the ministry to have extra cost, because every child now will move into boarding school, and that may lead to a systems collapse.
Kagusha?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I'd like to inquire from the CS if he's aware if he's going to amalgamate all the bursaries into one kitty that is going to help the education to be free, if he's sure that that bursary will be sufficient to ensure that education is free in Kenya. Does that money provide for free education sufficiently? And of course, the CS will have also to explain how this will be done without having to increase the percentage of the much we are spending in education from 27% to up to 30%. And also, you note that already as we talk, the education for day schools is generally free. What students pay for is their meals. And is that what the CS is going to provide for free to the students? That is the free meals. And Mr. Speaker, you realize that the primary schools and the JSS, the junior secondary schools, are now asking parents also to provide meals for their students through a system that they are paying for the same. And this has also now made the junior secondary schools to pay just as much as the day schools are paying, the day secondary schools are paying. Is the CS telling us that the ministry is going to have sufficient money to cater for all these if they amalgamate the bursaries? Because I find it very suspect myself, if you're going to take money that is already devolved in the constituencies and bring that money back to Nairobi, where we cannot be able to reach the minister and having removed it from the leaders who are on the ground, and then we have to come running up and down in Nairobi looking for the same bursaries again. Mr. Speaker, of course, as I complete, we also have the issue of the banding. We feel that the banding system that has been used, how to categorize the students, has unfairly targeted the students who are well-deserving. Quite a number of students who ought to have received better funds are not receiving that. We have seen people who are coming from very poor backgrounds receiving, being in band 5, and that spells doom to their education. And there are some rumors at some point that the PS has introduced a consultant who kind of distorted the banding system, rather the instrument that was used by the Higher Education Loan Board before to categorize students. And I think this is something that needs to be cleared. You know, Mr. Speaker, this is raising a lot of suspicion. Some people are even saying that people from certain regions are being disfavored by this system. And this is now bringing propaganda and misinformation rife. And so we need to address this. Of course, Mr. Speaker, this issue of insecurity in the schools also need to be addressed more proactively than it's being done now. And I want to hope that the ministry is going now to work with the new IG, Mr. Kaja, who now I congratulate for having been nominated by this and approved by this National Assembly, and I know he's really a capable man, and he's going to do a good job. We believe so. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I believe that they will be able to work together with the gentleman Kanja, who now is a leading light in security apparatus in this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate.
CS, you let him respond to those, then we do other rounds. I'll be patient until we get to the bottom of this, yes, members. So be patient with every situation. Minister, as you come to respond to all those, you may wish to convince the House, and I am not quite persuaded, that from 20th August, when this matter came to this House, and to date, you have hurriedly prepared 2 bills on a very weighty issue without even involving the committees of this House to get the correct data, correct information, and formulate correct policy in trying to deal with the issues of the multiplicity of bursaries. You may, I think Kagusha has touched on that.
Yes.
And
yes,
you can also...
I can...
Naisula, Rindikiri.
Yes.
Then,
Mr. Speaker, I will start with your question, which was also tying to Honorable Naisula's, on the question of the 14,000 that have so far not reported or that are not captured, though they were placed. Mr. Speaker, the trends that have been established from previous years is that when students are placed in universities, only about 80% report. So it was actually expected that we would have 122,634 reporting, but we have 124,364 have reported. So we have 2,000 and something more than the expected trends. But a survey is being undertaken to confirm where these students could be. Sometimes these students do not take up their positions, or they have multiple admissions and they go out of the country. So we are not able to confirm that, but we are going to undertake a survey to confirm where they are. And some go to private universities abroad. And I'm being told that some actually get married and they don't continue with schooling. Yeah, but we will check and find out what the position is. With respect to the question of appeals by Honorable Naisula again, we have an average of 12,000 students who have appealed, and the appeals are being processed. What we did, we created a portal for appeal, and we said it should be left open for 3 months until December 2024. This is because from last year, the first years and some of the second years were informed that there are some who are deferred their courses because of not being able to pay the previous year. So we said, let us create this portal so that we have even those ones who had not applied last year to apply this year, so that they can come in and go to school. So we have about 12,000 students that have applied. Now, private universities only get the loans, they do not get the scholarships. The students who go to private universities are free to apply for the loans, but not the scholarships. Now, with respect to the capitation space, the reason why we have this funding model is because the capitation space was not working. When the capitation provisional program, the DUC, was in place, the government was supposed to have paid 80% of the fund or the monies that is supposed to go to the students. At no time the government actually paid 80%. The highest they ever paid was 66%. This year, the total they have paid is 38% of the capitation that is required. What then this did is to create a financial crisis in our universities, where to date we have about 23 universities in a financial crunch, leading to the challenges that you see, including the strikes that are taking place. That is because when you do not have resources in place, you can't sign a CBA. You need to have money in order for you to sign the CBA. When the funds are not released, it created a financial crisis, a financial crunch, leading to an examination of what can be done to ensure that this problem is solved. This is what led to the funding model where the money follows the student, so that when you receive X number of students, you receive X amount of money depending on the banding. So in questions of releasing these funds on time has improved, because under the new funding model, I think even this year, the figures were released before the students reported. So that problem of capitation has been solved partially by the funding model. In terms of the challenges that we have in the fires and what we are doing being reactionary, it is true that there has been a problem with compliance with some of the regulations that are in place. And sometimes we react to these situations when something happens. That's why I was saying, Mr. Speaker, that perhaps we need to move the policies from just being policies to either regulations or an act of parliament or a statute, or so that there is punishment, actual punishment, instead of administrative action, so that people can comply. It has been there, and we are thinking we need to move it, and since we have that opportunity now, we will be able to maybe move some of the regulations into the band or to the level of statute so that they can attract penalties. Mr. Speaker, maybe I can tie your question to the issue that you raised, that we've hurriedly prepared the bill. Let me clear the air that the bills that we've prepared arose out of the recommendation of the Working Party prior to the meeting of 20th of August. Those particular bills are not dealing with amalgamation of the bursaries or all the scholarships that we have. We haven't reached that position, and we've not had that conversation. In fact, perhaps what needs to happen is, if that conversation is going to be had, it would include whatever changes that were coming out of the recommendations of the Working Party. So we've not done any of those bills. These are the ones that had been done before the conversation relating to amalgamation came to the fore. So that is what I was saying, that they had even done public participation in March 2024. That was long before we met. So as a ministry, we've not come up with a policy or an act or a statute to deal with amalgamation or bursaries or anything, because this is a deep conversation that you've got to have, and then we'll see how it develops. Honorable Rindiki raised the issue of 90% of his constituents being banded in band 3 and 4. And the answer to your concern and why we've not furnished you with the details of how the students have been banded is because when we opened the particular portal for appeals, it started changing, because students now are being moved from one band to another, so that we are not able to give you information that is reliable until we close that portal when the appeals are done, and then we have a clear analysis of who is in which band. Then we can use that as the actual figures that the students have. So at the moment, as a ministry, we are not able to say this is the actual because it is ongoing. Even as we speak, it's open, it keeps changing. And once we close in November, an analysis is done and a review is done by the committee that has been set up, then we will be able to give you a proper analysis of that. And this model starts from the basis that it was supposed to benefit the most needy students to be in band 1. If then we find that they've moved to band 3 and band 4, we must test it and review it and find out, is that correct? Is that movement based on the system itself or the data that has been given? Was the data that was given correct? If it's not correct, can it then be corrected so that the students who need support the most get it? That is the whole basis of this model. So if it does not do that, we then need to examine it. That's why we said, because there are issues that have been raised, let us have the committee in place which has been set up by the president, involving all stakeholders so that it can be examined to ensure that its efficacy is above board, to ensure that it actually does what it was meant to do. And that is what we are doing, and we are hoping by the end of the 8 weeks when the report is done, we will be able to give you data and can report back here, data that is reliable and that can be used to keep improving the model. If we find that the errors are outside the margin of error, then we will fault the system. But if we find that the errors are within the margin of error, or the error was caused by our own data, then we correct that. And that's why we are trying to expand the variables so that even when you say something that is can self-correct. Yes.
David Speaker.
Sorry. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Just on a point of order, I think the question asked by Honorable Kagusha is what has been in the public domain. That the testing instrument, the MTI, that has been used even before the current new funding model was working. And if you look at the results by the old funding, the old means testing instrument and the current one, there is a variation. And it is also in the public domain. That, and it's a pity because the cabinet secretary was not in office at that time. This was done by the PS in Yangala, who is present today. She introduced a group of consultants who came in and interfered with what HELB has been doing for years. And that is where we have now the challenge. So I think what Kagusha was asking is that confirm, were consultants hired to do the job of HELB? Yes or no? Did those consultants develop a new MTI? Yes or no? So that we can know where the problem lies and we can now work towards making sure that we correct it, even as the task force produces its office. Because these are the things that give the government a bad name and give our president a bad name because of the failure of his own public officers. Thank you.
Go on, Cs.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You are now on Clive, Amalgamation, and Kagusha. They are almost all the same.
Yes, I will.
And you can pick up also what the Deputy Speaker has asked.
Yes, thank you.
And be a little faster.
Yes, Clyde indicated or asked the question on page 15, that is question number 6, on whether it is free. And I've answered that question in the following manner, that we've not reached the level where we've developed a port of all the bursaries and scholarships and the capitations, where we can say that we can now give free education from PP1, from pre-primary all the way to tertiary. That has not, is a conversation that has arisen because of this challenge. We've not reached there. But what we can say as a ministry is we do not have sufficient data that needs to be collected even for that decision to be made. And I think, Mr. Speaker, you are alluding to it, that for us to be able to reach that decision, we must first and foremost do an analysis of how many students do we have, how much money is required for free education from standard 1 or pre-primary all the way to the university, how much are we allocating from the particular funds that the government is giving, how much are the scholarships out there, both public and private, so that an analysis, a math can be done to determine whether that money is sufficient to give free primary, free education across the board, including the meals that the students get, the kits that they get, all that stuff. So it is important that that is a conversation that is too detailed for us to be able to do in a month. It is something that needs to be discussed as we go forward. But as we are doing that discussion, we have students that are in school that we have to use the current funding model to ensure that it is as close as possible to the realities of the students that we are supporting, so that nobody is disadvantaged and nobody misses school because they have been misbanded. And that is the reason why we convinced the vice chancellors to admit each and every student, and we've agreed that no student will be sent away for non-payment of their household portion until this issue is resolved. So in a way, we have a chance to examine that MTI, find out whether it is the right one, find out even what Madam Deputy Speaker is asking, whether there was any sort of interference, so that it is corrected. But the information that I have is that the team that is being referred to as interfering with the MTI was a team that was set up from the ministry to evaluate the efficacy of that particular model, whether it is bringing out the result that is expected. And it's a team that was internal. It was led by Professor Romanos Odhiambo, who was the chair of the task force. Is the VC from Meru, is not a consultant from outside, is a part and parcel of our university. And most of the people that were there, including the CEO of HELP, who was then who was the FCPA, Charles Ngera, Mr. Monari is here, and a host of others. So it's not true that this particular team went into the MTI and interfered with it, because the credentials are with HELP. You can review, but you cannot attempt to tamper with it. So that information is information that we can't really verify, and I believe that the committee that has been set up right now by the president will be able to get into it. It's the only committee that is going to review, get into the system and find out, is there any sort of interference? Is it working? Are the variables enough to be able to give out the result that, as I've said, as close as possible to your reality? If, for example, I put in my data and it says I'm a border, then there's a problem. But if it says I am a judge, it is as close as possible because I've been a lawyer. So we are asking, when we get into the system and we are checking, are we putting the people as close as possible to where they are? And that is why when Rindiki says his constituents are in band 3 and 4, and it comes from a constituency that requires affirmative action, then we need to check and find out, is this true? But this is information that we'll give you once we have that analysis. I'm informed also, Mr. Speaker, that the report of that particular team that is being accused of having interfered with MTI was actually submitted to the Kamkunji, and it is there. It's a straightforward. It doesn't show any changes. It just shows we went in there, we put in information. It's giving information that is correct. So in terms of amalgamation, as a ministry, we are not there. It is something that is a conversation that has to be done, and do public participation until we get there. And I think that also deals with Kagushia's, Honorable Kagushia's question, and deals with the banding.
Let's take another round of 5. Dr. Nyikal, and restrict yourselves to one question or one comment, so that we can have as many members as possible.
Can I follow Nyikal?
Chair, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'm very near Nyikal.
Mine is technical. The key issue is the banding instrument. So you have said you are using means testing. Which means testing are you using? Is the proxy means testing or any other means testing? Now once you started using it, was there any public survey to validate the instrument? Like if you used it, then you went and the public looked at the families, and did it tell the income as the instrument is showing? Now that you actually used it before, was there a public survey for verification so that when you look at what the instruments have given you and you take a sample, you don't go through the whole country, did you find that the students as given you in the bands were reflected in their home states as that is the possible level of income? And you had this paragraph 4. You had 124 admitted, and out of that 138 admitted, and out of that 124 that reported, and 75 paid. When you analyze this, how did it relate to the banding? Which bands were able to pay and which bands were not able to pay? Because this gives you a reflection of the instrument you are using. Because all these things we are saying, if that instrument is not working, we will not get anywhere. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I also dovetail my question into what Professor Dr. Yikal has said. The means testing instrument has issues, Honorable Speaker, because how come this means testing instrument does not capture the history of the students in paying fees at school? Because if this is a student who was not able to pay fees at school, was supported by bursary, was supported by a sponsor, then the banding is that this student is actually put in band 5. But yet, if you look at the history of the student in school, actually this student has a fee balance he has not paid in high school after Form 4 of almost 70,000. He has not cleared high school fees. He's being admitted to university at band 5. He can't even pay the money at the high school for him to get the certificate to join high school. How come this means testing instrument did not capture that history of a student? Is it that you don't care, or it doesn't care about high school? Because that's where the children are coming from. That is a weakness on. The second thing, this means testing instrument knows that this student has issues of fees. But because he missed or she missed a few marks to join public university to do medicine, he's placed in a private university and there's no scholarship. There's no scholarship. So students have been admitted to Uzima University, which is a private university, to study medicine, and they are not given scholarship, and yet the means testing instrument shows that they are very poor students. That, Mr. Speaker, that means testing instrument did not capture, and that is a great weakness. It has led to very many students. If you look at the data, they're saying 12,000 students. If you look at this report, around 12,000 students have appealed. But also say 14 students failed to report. 14,000 failed to report. There is a correlation there. Actually, probably all these students who have appealed have not reported because they are part of those students where the means testing instrument did not capture. But if you have such a huge number of students that the means testing instrument did not capture properly, it means there's something significantly wrong with that means. And that's why we are here, and the president has to appoint committees to review this thing.
Thank you.
Because of that. So I'd like to really get answers to that, Honorable Speaker.
You made your point.
Thank you.
Shimba.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I also sympathize with the new CS because he's in a ministry which has a lot of challenges.
Don't sympathize with him, ask him a question.
Yeah, I'm asking him, but yes. I'm sympathizing with him as well.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, it is coming out very clearly that the elephant in the room is the system which is being used to define all these things we are talking about. And for as long as we go on with committees being appointed every now and again, we are not solving the problem. That is a merry-go-round. So the issue we are asking here, Mr. Speaker, is let us make education free for all so that we remove stress to all our students and parents. And the biggest burden, Mr. Speaker, is falling on us as MPs. First of all, I would like to thank the ministry, Mr. Speaker. They assisted me when principals were refusing with certificates, yet we had agreed in this hall here that no certificate should be withheld. The PS assisted me and we got the certificates. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, without them paying. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I would also like to challenge the ministry. The funds that the ministry also gets, apart from the bursaries that we have, why don't we, Mr. Speaker, get to know as MPs how that money is disbursed to the various constituencies? Because we don't know which formula is used to distribute the money that the Ministry of Education has, and some of the MPs get these funds, but others do not get. We want to have what we call equality in the distribution of these funds, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister tell us what system, what arrangement is he having to ensure that there is fair distribution of the funds that they are holding as a ministry to all the Kenyans, because we are all taxpayers? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Cynthia. Is this Cynthia or Toto? You look alike. This is Cynthia.
Honorable Speaker, I am way older than the Honorable Line Toto, the Honorable Member for Bomet. Honorable Speaker, I want to ask a simple question. I have 2 children who are admitted to the university, same parents, same house, same income, but each of them got a different banding. I would want to understand how that happens. Secondly, Honorable Chair, the means testing instrument should be doing better this year as opposed to last year. But Honorable Speaker, it is surprising that it is doing worse and badly than it was doing last year. Honorable Speaker, I was in Kenyatta University during a first year's welcoming party, the ones from my community, on 7th, last week, Honorable Chair, Honorable Speaker. It is a thorny issue, Honorable Speaker, that you cannot speak about in the university, because the response you get is an uproar from the students. And the ministry, Honorable Speaker, looks like it's not paying attention to curing the disease, to doing serious surgery to it, Honorable Speaker. It is simply covering the wound. And I want to ask the ministry to sort out this matter, because this is an issue that is affecting the young people and the young people who come from needy families, Honorable Speaker.
Kajwang.
Mr. Speaker, permit me to have bragging rights that the Honorable competent CS was in college with me and a classmate of the member, the Honorable member for Tharaka, and the only member called Wakili in this house. And yes, of course, the deputy speaker. These were illustrious people, and I have no doubt that they are competent. But, Mr. Speaker, the reason why I rise to ask this is because of his competence and knowledge of law. And I am sure if I raise this matter, I am sure that he is going to consider, and perhaps we will get somewhere. He is aware, Honorable Speaker, Mr. CS, of Article 94, paragraph 5. Article 4(5), no person or body other than...
Order, members in that corner. We are discussing an extremely serious issue that affects you and your people you represent. But you are just whining away the afternoon, laughing and chatting. That's not fair.
Yeah, so that Article 94(5), no person or body other than Parliament has the power to make provision having the force of law in Kenya, except under authority conferred by the Constitution or by legislation. I understand that the Basic Act, the Education Act, confers, the legislation confers authority on the minister and so on. But coming to paragraphs 20, 21, 22, following the Kamkunji that yours faithfully convened, you helped the ministry to understand that there was very little synergy or more energy was required to communication to the general public. This is generally what is called public participation, or if you want, stakeholder engagement and so on. And in 22, in this regard, I can see that they saw the light. They took...
Na sasa Mheshimiwa Rais atapiga picha pamoja na timu yote ikiwa na officials. Picha ya pili tutaomba officials waweze kutoka, tuache timu peke yao. Photo opportunity with His Excellency the President. So the first photo will be with the officials, together with the officials. After that, we shall request the officials to retreat or exit, as His Excellency will take a picture with the team. Tuweze kutabasamu, smile, picha itoke ikiwa safi na imefurahi. Haya, the officials, if we can kindly exit and just leave the team. The officials, if we can exit and leave the team with His Excellency for the second photo. Let's proceed to take our seats, officials. Thank you, Your Excellency. Let us now take our seats. We'll also request His Excellency to take his position where he's going to sit. And as we do that, I'll invite the Vice President of FKF, Doris Petra, who's going to lead us in our order of prayer. So I'll request we be upstanding. Tutaanza kwa maombi na nikimwalika Madam Doris Petra, the Vice President of FKF, who's going to lead us in a short prayer before we proceed with the rest of the program. Let us be upstanding, please. Wale ambao tumeketi naomba tusimame ili tuweze kuomba.
Tuombe na tuamini. Father Lord in heaven, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the privilege of being with our leadership. We thank you for the opportunity to participate in the World Cup. We pray for our Excellency to continue guiding us in this country. We pray for your blessings for all our players and our officials. We pray also for the leadership of FKF and everyone that is here. We pray for our Ministry of Sports that has kept us together and guiding us. All that we pray, believing in Jesus' name. Amen.
Let us kindly take our seats. Your Excellency, the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, and for today's purposes, number 9, striker number 9. The CS Sports Honorable Kipchumba Murkomen, the PS Sports Engineer Tum, Madam Beatrice Lachi and Peter Goretti, Irene Mayaka, nominated Member of Parliament, FKF President Nick Mwendwa, FKF CEO Barry Otieno, Harambee Starlets, Junior Starlets, Coach Mildred Cheche, Harambee Starlets Captain Elizabeth Ochaka, and Harambee Starlets and all who are here. Your Excellency, with your permission, allow me to invite Harambee Starlets Captain Elizabeth Ochaka to come and just make a few remarks before.
Praise God everyone. Mimi namshukuru Mungu kwa kutupa hiyo opportunity. Yenyewe ijakuwa rahisi. Since we started the journey of World Cup, tumepambana mpaka tumefika World Cup. So
Thank you for that. What I can say is that, in fact, when these issues arose, we decided to use the chiefs and the village elders that we have in the country and Angao to also check whether the information that we have is correct relating to the number of students.
Members,
yes,
What's your point of order, Naisula?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having listened to my colleagues and also on a different matter, not the verification, Mr. Speaker, having listened to the CS, it is clear we're still on a free mode because the students have just been allowed to school as the ministry continues to sort out these issues. Mr. Speaker, at what point can we get a definite answer as this House that this model is working? Because I've just thought about it when they say that because of the Kamkunji that you called, we implemented your directive and instructed that all public universities will admit students irrespective of their ability, So we are on a free mode as we speak. By the time the schools close and we come again next semester, will we find ourselves in the same position, Mr. Speaker?
Go on, Waziri, and answer.
Yes.
We'll still give everybody an opportunity, so just hold your horses.
Thank you. I was still on Dr. Nyikal's position about the verification. The variables, Dr. Nyikal, that were used, Mr. Speaker, included family structures, the schools attended. This information ties with what Honorable Bayer was talking about. In fact, the schools attended was part of the variable that was used to determine whether a child is able to pay or not to pay in order for them to be banded in a certain band. What was perhaps not clear is whether you are in a school under sponsorship or personal payment. So this is now the information that is being expanded to find out if you are banded in the wrong band because you are sponsored and it looked from the MTI that you have self-capacity, it's then correct. This is what we are doing with the appeals where you are giving now more information to say, although I was in an academy under sponsorship, so that it is corrected. We are not saying that we do not acknowledge that there is a problem. We acknowledge that there is a problem, and what we are trying to do is solve that problem. But while we are solving that problem, the children cannot stay home. We said, come to school, stay in school as we clear this issue. The definite answer that I can give to Honorable Lesuda that we need to be able to clear this is within the next 3 months so that when this January comes, we do not have this problem again. That is the basis upon which the committee has 8 weeks to resolve the issues that surround it.
Cynthia Muge's question, 2 children,
Cynthia,
same father, same mother.
Children, same mother.
Different bands.
Different bands. And this again may be a problem of how the data was entered. So what we would suggest is if you give us the details of those children, we can find out, did they enter the same data? Because if you go in and put in information that is different from your sister or from your brother, it will take you to different places depending on what information you put in. So I can't really stand here and give you an actual reason why they were given different bands unless I have more information on that particular case.
Which, yes, Bayer?
The question on private universities where they do not get scholarship, I think this is a legal and policy issue that has been discussed here many times, and I think it is something that perhaps all of us as a country we need to discuss to make that decision. It is not a ministerial policy decision, it's a government decision.
Private university. He doesn't want to go to private university. He's applied to go to a university in Kenya. COPS places this student in a private university, and he has not requested. Then when he gets the form to go to the private university, he's told he can't go to scholarship. I think CS, the PS really helped me with these students, and I want to acknowledge and thank her, because I said transfer those students back to public university. But there are other kids who felt, I want to do medicine. I have been placed in a private university because they couldn't, because there was too many applicants in the public universities. Now these students are there, they're suffering. They have said, Minister said, let them go. Some of them chose to go. What will happen to these students? I have made specific requests to the minister. Kindly transfer the students from Kilifi North back into public university in causes that are equally as weighty as those causes. And that is how you will save a whole generation of bright young people who have been put in private universities where they can never afford because they still have balances even in high school.
Yes, Minister.
Yes, I'm informed, and this one, I don't have all the information as you speak, and you give me more time to go and find out how to deal with it, is that when students are placed in courses or they have made a choice in certain universities and they are not able to go there because of their marks, then the system places them into a different university, which might end up being a public university, but it's something that we'll do something about. As you correctly say, the PS has been able to help. So we are alive to that. We'll be able to sort it out.
Kajwang's.
The question that my friend Kajwang raises is correct, that we are going to, once this information is collected, it will be reduced into a document that then would be brought here as a sectional paper or as a draft, then we include it as regulations or gazettement. So it is a process that we've started to ensure that we have this grounded in law once it is completed, so that it has the force of law.
Moreo's question?
Moreo's issue was that we need to go back. What is good, you should not go ahead and change it, but when we were in school, at that time we were quite very few, and we were having, yes. So what has happened is that as the students increased, the government then was not able to do the capitation, and I said it that although the government was supposed to give 80% of the capitation, the highest they ever gave was 66%. This year they have given 38%, meaning there is a hole, there is a big shortfall that required to be filled, and that is the reason why it became necessary for this particular model to be thought of so that money can follow the student. However, we have to improve it, and that is what we are doing by working with all these teams to ensure that we have a model that passes the test of time.
Let's take the next round. Mugabe.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. I've been following the conversation, rather the debate, and there's one component that has been either ignored, but you're not focusing on it. The issue is the CS comfortable with the new fees structures for universities? Because that's a very critical component, that the fees of universities were raised in very enormous numbers, from what people used to pay around 16,000 in a year to 600,000 in some courses. So that is the first issue. Are they comfortable with that? And the people who are made, rather were in that particular task force to look at the issue of fees. Who are these people? And you'd find most of them were actually professors and vice chancellors of universities who wanted to get more money. So we must start to address the issue from the issue of school fees. Are we comfortable with that? Number two, on the same issue of school fees, if a student gets good grades and they are called to do medicine, then the percentage that they're supposed to contribute is high. So we are basically punishing those students who have done well. And you'll find that even some students may opt to do other, maybe not so marketable courses that require lower grades because of the issues of the fees of the courses that they qualify for. That is another component that we need to look at.
Thank you, Sirat.
And if you'd allow me, Speaker.
There are so many interests, Mugabe, that's enough. Sirat, please try and ask one clarification, one question. Give him the mic. It's one next to you. Or is it ahead of you? Give him the mic.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think they have a problem with me. I don't know. Anyway, the ministry is trying to tell us that they have taken data which is not accurate. Having said that, we have seen there is an interest component, which is, I mean, we have different students that practice different faith in this country. I don't know how a Muslim student can apply using the conventional loan. Why haven't you, why haven't you discussed it with other stakeholders to get Sharia compliance for this student to get this loan? Thank you very much.
Bensouda.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. First, I would like to ask the CS to confirm whether feasibility study was done for the MTI, pre-testing of the instrument, and who were the target population for this, and what was informational on that. Because I heard the CS mention about chiefs were asked to do responses, and to me, that was not adequate target population. And a cost-benefit analysis. Mr. Speaker, as I stand to ask the same question, components on that, we mentioned, the CS mentioned about ensuring that the TVETs and the higher education also they get the funding. At home, I was just away from home 2 days ago. There are students who are in the villages. There are students who are supposed to go to the TTIs. They cannot access. When the VCs are called to be told and given addresses that no student should not be allowed to report to school. We are talking of theories in Parliament. At home, the students are at home. And also when I'm talking about cost-benefit analysis, I am asking in regard to yesterday we saw the multimedia students, they were out, there is no electricity, there is no water, and many other things. So cost-benefit analysis, before we talk about amalgamating all the bursaries, which the CS has pronounced that this requires time of about 3 months or something. Why do we waste Kenyans' money in forming committees to check on what we propose that fails this country? Competency-based curriculum has not gained even up to 50%. I'm a primary school teacher. Right now, the bursaries we are talking to propose to amalgamate will not work. Education should be free for all. Vision 2030. All Kenyans at primary level must access education. That is opposite of what is taking place in Kenya. What is our transition level, retention? Mr. Speaker, would you give me a minute kindly?
You are making a speech. Yes, Ruku.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Why is it that the ministry cannot go to the old financing model as we get it right to this new financing model, Mr. Speaker? We have, the minister said we have 14,000 students who have not reported. Is it possible to get the list of the 14,000 students who have not reported and where they come from, so that we, the members of parliament, can make follow-up with those students? Because 14,000, Mr. Speaker, is a very huge number. It's almost, if we compare, and all these are likely to come from marginalized constituencies like Mbeere North. So it is extremely important to get...
There's no evidence to that effect.
It is true, but Mr. Speaker, you know, we have many marginalized constituencies. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, is we are facing a problem at the University of Nairobi, where the former Vice Chancellor, Professor Kiama, was thrown out of the office through a coup. And we are witnessing a downfall of management of the university. What is the minister doing? What's the minister doing on the issues of University of Nairobi? And also we have
enough. Women Rep Busia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to ask the CS if Section 27 in the Constitution Article 27, Section 4 was really observed. It is, this model is very discriminative, and you can never tell if a student who's applying for fees knows the whereabouts of their parents. A student might be feeling that there are only two in their home because he knows daddy and mommy were married and they are legitimately together, not knowing that daddy has another wife that they do not know, and the other wife has another child. That child is also feeling that he is alone in their home. These children, if you put them together, they belong to one man, they might be 6. So this one saying that he's the only one at home is denied fees because daddy has a good salary. It leads to these children not going to school because daddy will be overwhelmed, suffocated, eventually just give up because of this model. So it's very discriminative. Let us give these children, all of them, equal opportunities to go to school. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Marenge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this means testing instrument seems to have assumed that these young people only began to exist in this country upon the release of the results of KCSE. Yet the ministry has a system referred to as NEMIS. If the ministry used that system, you would not need to apply, expanded the scope of the system, captured more data about the students' history, performance, right from when they are in the system. By the time they are sitting for the exams, you would not need this means testing instrument. So I'm advising an expansion of the scope of capturing data using NEMIS. The second thing is the anxiety that you're causing in the institutions today. Waiting for 3 months after appeal without knowing what this appeal is going to be like and whether there is any recourse. Should my appeal fail, where do I go? Do I stop? Does my education come to an end, or what do I do? Lastly, Mr. Speaker, on safety in our schools because of the fires, and we are affected in Nyeri, the ministry has totally failed in implementing its own regulations in terms of safety and occupational health of our students. And Mr. Speaker, the Education Committee should demand that the ministry files with Parliament the reports of the quality assessments in our schools in every quarter. And that is also shared with parents so that our children are not exposed to certain dangers in our institution.
Last on that, Carole Omondi. Then the Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
We'll do another round after that until you get satisfied.
Thank you very much. I'll try and be very brief, Honorable Speaker. We've looked at this matter, I think, several times, and I think the issue is just about accessibility and affordability of education. But that, having said that, let me make a proposal that I think for this university funding model to work, the applications, as I said last time, should be made while the students are still in high school, before they even sit for the exams, because that is where all the information about their financial records, how they've been paying fees, and then they have teachers, counselors to guide them, and also internet connectivity. I think the application for the loans should be made before the students leave school. Secondly, the determination as to what somebody should get as a scholarship, a loan, or aid is a financial question. But if you look at the MTI instrument to determine the household income, the parameters are sociocultural. How do you answer a financial question using sociocultural parameters? As I said last time, let us use financial tools to determine the financial income or needs of every student. And those, the range of information is available, it is out there. You've mentioned tax records. There are also M-Pesa records of the guardians. There are also employment records. There are also other government systems like social protection. There are a range of financial tools that we can use to make that determination. And then I would like to suggest that
we also include in this funding model medical insurance for the students. It's not covered in any of the tools. And finally, this may be a little radical, but I think it is time as members of parliament, we looked for ways and means of dedicating more resources to improving university facilities. And one of them is to cut political party funding and dedicate those resources to university education. Thank you very much.
Yes, CS, that's his opinion. Pardon? Yes, Shimba?
I had actually requested the ministry to inform this House what his ministry is doing to ensure that there is equitable distribution of the finances that they hold. We know you have finances, but how are you distributing those funds?
Point
what mechanism?
made.
Yeah.
You had walked out.
Thank you. Thank you. On your question on distribution of finances, the capitation is based on the enrollment of the students, so that if from your area X number of students come, it's that X number times the amount. That is how it's done. It's not possible to go to
just
holds, which it distributes to MPs. But which method do they use to ensure that every constituency gets a fair share of that money?
Understood.
I can proceed. On the question that Honorable Mugabe asked whether we are comfortable with the fee structure and that the fees was raised, part of what the committee is going to look at is the cost of the programs in various schools, and it is part of the TORs that we are putting there, because what was happening before, the programs were rated the same, but you'll agree with us that, for example, if you are doing arts and somebody else is doing a program that requires equipment, the cost is not the same for practicals and theory. So that is going to be looked at and rationalized so that the fee is properly proportionate to the cost and that it's not extraneous or that it's not that high. So that is going to be, it's part of what the committee is going to do. Sirat, your comments are well taken. It is true on the different faiths and the program that is being developed, the MTI that is being developed vis-a-vis the loans, we are working towards coming up with a model or with a particular model that deals with Sharia law, Sharia compliant, so that we are not forcing people to go to a different level. It is being done. That particular suggestion is very, very welcome, and thank you for it. Bensouda, on whether the visibility was done and the cost-benefit analysis was done, yes, it was done, and that is why for the last 2 years, when this model has worked, the universities have been able to slightly meet their requirements. And what happened, unfortunately, in multimedia, I was informed this morning that it was a particular pipe that burst and there was no water to the hostels, but that has since been rectified, and there is a meeting tomorrow with the students, and we'll have a report at the end of the day. So that is being done. The cost-benefit analysis was done. But to be clear, I have not said we are going to amalgamate. Please don't get me wrong. The ministry has not said that it's going to amalgamate any of the bursaries because we are not there yet. It is a conversation that is being had, and you are having it, other people are having it. Once it becomes law in the future, then we will be able to apply it as necessary. The old funding model by Rogo saying that perhaps these 14,000 students, we need their details, that's a good suggestion, and we are going to get the details from COOPS and share with you, so that if somebody comes from your constituency, you're able to determine and find out the reason why they've not gone to school. That's a very good suggestion, and thank you very, very, very much. On the issue of Professor Kiama, that is an active issue that is ongoing with the council and the university. We are dealing with it, and once it is concluded, we'll be able to give you a report, but it's not yet concluded. It's a governance issue, it's being dealt with. The women rep from Busia, the issue of discrimination, this is where we are saying when data is being placed into the MTI, the information can be collated, and this is what we are trying to find out. Is the data that is being given by the students the correct data, and is there something that can be done? The intention of the funding model is not to discriminate. The intention is to ensure that the students who need the support of the government in doing their courses are able to study. Thank you, Honorable Mathenge, for your suggestions, and it is true that the scope perhaps needs to be expanded to ensure that the gap is not that high, because when you expand the variables, you reduce the error. You are able to bring the results closer to the margin of error. On the issue of 3 months, the students have been advised on what we are doing, that once we do the banding or rebanding, depending on where you are, then we'll deal with that issue at that point and give time, give room for them to continue paying or not paying until the issue is resolved. We are not going to disenfranchise the students by saying, you are in this band, you are now moved to this one, you didn't pay, go back home or something like that. That is what we are working on, because the fund is giving that much more money to the university than before. Remember, the DUC for this year, for example, has given 38%. If you take the 75,000 students who have paid, and then you take the portion of the government that has paid, the funding model has paid that much higher than 38%. So there's that much more resources in the universities, and that's how they are able to keep the students in school. And we are able to work this out to ensure that whatever problem that is there with this particular mechanism is sorted out without affecting the students, because the students were not the cause of the problem. So we are resolving it, and we are live to it. The suggestion that we should give reports on safety measures to this house quarterly, I think is an excellent suggestion. It's an excellent suggestion so that we can become accountable, that whatever is happening there in our schools, everybody is aware of it. And since you represent various constituencies, if you find it is a school in your constituency that is not meeting those standards, you can also help us through your system to ensure that those schools have what is required to ensure that our children are safe. That's an excellent suggestion, and we have picked it and we'll run with it. Similar with what my friend Karoli Omondi has said, the funding model requires those variables to not only deal with the ones that are socioeconomic, but financial as well. So that mix does give us an indication of where the student or the parents are, and it's an excellent suggestion, and we are taking it with gratitude. On the issue of the political funds going to schools or universities, that's something that is it's under law. It's a legal issue. If you pass that law, well and good, we'll just be happy to take the money. And the suggestion that we need to include a medical insurance component is something that we look at, and it's an important suggestion. And thank you so much for those brilliant suggestions.
Dorothy? Okay. Give Dorothy the mic. You're giving the wrong location. Move.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I start by saying the success of any progressive nation lies in its education systems. Mr. Speaker, I want to challenge the Minister and his team seated here because, Mr. Speaker, if there is a ministry that is well structured, where the minister would be sitting down and at the click of a button, he can be able to access all the information that he likes, is the Ministry of Education. The data that he is purporting not to have, I have been a primary school teacher. The enrollment of the school, every data is put in a system right from day one. I can be able to tell as a teacher the number of students in the school, those in class 1, and so in every part of this country. Mr. Speaker, that is not an excuse that data is not available. If they want to get the best testing tool for this particular funding, they can get this information from our schools, Mr. Speaker. Every teacher knows the child who sleeps hungry. Every teacher can be able to tell you a child who has no father, a child who is a total orphan, a child who has well-to-do with parents. So the data can be availed in the schools. There is no need of doing a scientific way of getting data for this funding. This is availed in schools. Mr. Speaker, my question goes directly to the TVET, and I want to really thank the PS TVET because she is always available to answer questions when required to do so. Mr. Speaker, up to this time, the TVET institutions, and it's the fourth quarter, they have not gotten any single cent in matter of funding. And the students in those schools can be very raw. Mr. Speaker, if it is not possible, I think there should be a mechanism of ensuring that the principals are allowed to charge some little money even for operations, so that at the end of the day, we don't have a replica of what is happening, what happened yesterday in multimedia. There is no water, no electricity, nothing. Mr. Speaker, what is the ministry doing to ensure that capitation is released in our schools at the earliest opportunity so that our teachers don't suffer?
Sunguli.
Mr. Speaker, with regards to the loans that are given to the students, what is the interest rate that they are supposed to pay back with? And my second comment is actually on the capitalization of the. Now, it is given per student, and I have asked this question before to your predecessor, Mr. CS, and I don't know whether I take it as a concern in my constituency that because you give capitation per student, per capita, what it has done is that there are some very, very industrious, some very, very finance-oriented head teachers who are overstaffing their schools because that's when they can get more money. Is there a policy in the ministry to curb students per class? And is that policy actually being implemented as of now? Because some of our schools are underpopulated while some are overpopulated. And just because the head teacher knows how to get around it and get more money. But I had one
each. Ferdinand, we're coming to an end. So ask one question each.
Yeah, I want to take this opportunity to thank the CS for trying to answer some of these questions. But the most important thing, as I'm a slightly older student of the University of Nairobi, why don't you go back to the old system? Because it looks like, from what I'm seeing and from your presentation, Bwana CS, I think this system is not going to work. Let's go back to the old system because we have enough universities in this country. Plus, of course, we are having also TVET. I want also to say that, of course, my TVET in Kwanzaa has not been completed because you have already convened, but we have enough institutions Why don't you go back to the old system? Because this one here, it looks from my colleagues and from your presentation, the system is not working. Go back.
Thank you.
Now,
Ochanda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the ministry, the CS, are really struggling to sort out a problem in the country. And that's why exactly we have these banding issues. But as we look at that, they are trying to target the 130,000 plus students. Besides that, there are over 300,000 plus students in year 2 to year 6, some to extreme situations of year 8 and year 9. What is it that the ministry is doing for this group of students, knowing that there's an issue, there's a big problem? What is it that the ministry is doing to sort out the mess that there is in? Or are we to wait for the transition for the next 4 years to sort out their problems?
Q. Is that a member for Kinango? No. At the back? Yes. Is that Gashagwa? There's a lot of reflection. I couldn't quite tell.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No. I'm not Rigiji. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. And I rise to ask or to request the CS. Why can't we can't we revert back to the old model? Because the variables considered in this banding are quite misleading. Mr. Speaker, when you ask someone the salary of a parent, and you place someone to a certain band, and maybe someone earns 100,000, and the responsibilities are fewer than that person who earns a different amount, why should we place somebody why should we place a student considering the salary or the income, not considering the responsibility of a parent?
Thank you. Museo Yula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I have an issue regarding the assurance by the ministry on the system. Can the ministry assure this House that the system will not be tampered with? I'm asking that because, Mr. Speaker, I have a case of a disabled student who was placed in Band 1 last year. Come this year, it moved to Band 2. So what happened? Why was the student moved from Band 1 to Band 2, and this is a disabled student? Secondly, the linkage with KRA, Mr. Speaker, is not a correct idea because many of our parents have no PIN numbers. So I will say a case where a student was put on Band 5, yet the parent is just a shoemaker in the village. So what criteria is being used?
Or a shoemaker?
A shoe repairer.
As a cobbler.
Yeah. So what assurance, what criteria is the ministry or is the system using to place these students in those Band 5, and yet they are very poor from the villages?
Thank you. Murugara. Minister, you will not sum and repeat questions. So where there are repeat questions, you just refer to your earlier answers, but let's give everybody an opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is whether university fees are standardized. That is, are they the same? And if so, the collections made by each university, is the revenue part of the revenue of the university, or it forms the part of the exchequer, in which case there has to be further funding, especially now that we have a huge number of students joining universities, the infrastructure is strained, it's constrained, and students possibly have even to go for lectures, not in lecture halls, but outside through windows at water view. exactly how does the ministry plan to ameliorate some of the problems, infrastructural problems we have with our universities through the funding?
Thank you. Member for, is it Kajiado East? South. Yes, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted just to start by saying the country, we are tired of demonstration. There was demonstration of teachers, now students are almost giving ultimatum. And the issue is under Article 95. This House has been given the mandate by the Kenyan people to see what is right concerning their issues. And Mr. Speaker, if you see, the piloting is wrong, application procedure again is wrong, the parameter of static, for example, if today I'm employed, by next year I'm not employed, it doesn't clearly state. Mr. Speaker, I think the whole thing is wrong. That's my observation. And I need you to give directives. We request that we give directives that the ministry take the Kenya Republic or the Kenyan people serious. My question is, the final one, we need to ask the ministry, they need to cost the actual cost. And Mr. Speaker, in all levels of education.
How do you cost the actual cost?
For example, in secondary schools, now parents are forced to pay BOM teachers. So when you do capitation, they are not considering the issue of BOM teachers that the parents are paying. So we need to know when they are saying free, tackling the free, they need to understand that we need to understand the actual cost of education, not taking the cost on the service.
Okay.
So the final one, Mr. Speaker, is equity.
Lel Mengit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I would like to disagree with the CS for education when he just mentioned that it will take months to come up with data on what is the exact cost of education if we were to make the education in this country free. I think we are addressing a different, we are addressing a problem with different solutions, Mr. Speaker. With the task force that has been formed should incorporate 50% of data scientists. This is simple maths, Mr. Speaker. Data is available, it's only to analyze. We don't need professors, we just need a Gen Z to do a data analysis and come up with possible options on possible ways of funding these programs. So this whole, the new program is not working, Mr. Speaker, and I think we should revert back to the old program so that we can save this country and make the students work well, have a humble time to study in school. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, is on the TVETs. Recently, Mr. Speaker, adverts were placed and a certain number of teachers for particular institutions like the TVETs were advertised and interviews were done. However, only a few got the letters of appointments and in different professions on those TVET institutions. One case example is for Mgwen TVC. Adverts were done for 5 professions, yet only 2 have received the letters of appointments. And lastly, the CS. Today, the university's academic staff union commenced a strike. How are you planning to resolve this issue? Thank you.
Yes, Robert Mbui.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first I wanted to just advise the CS because there is a casual comment that he made, and you know we are unanswered when answering the question he had asked of what has happened to the 14,171 students, and he said something to do with that some of them are probably married. Now, that may have because it's unanswered, that might annoy not just the young students, but also even the gender, because that's very, very chauvinist. Mr. Speaker, there is an issue that was raised by the Honorable Member T.J. Kajwang on the Article 94 of the Constitution. And Mr. Speaker, I want to just report that the Ministry of Education, not under his leadership, persistently has gone astray on this particular article, because he has just mentioned in his report here that the safety standards manual that they came up with. Mr. Speaker, in the strict reading of the Statutory Instruments Act on what a statutory instrument is, you realize that that is defined as one of the subsidiary legislations. So if you are coming up with a standards manual, safety standards manual for schools, then it has to have been brought to the House, Mr. Speaker, for approval. It was never brought. Now I've seen in his report, he's saying now he wants to give it some legality. Which, what it really means, Mr. Speaker, is that even if a school owner breaches the safety manual, there is nothing the ministry can do because there is no law that they have broken. So they have to be very careful. Mr. Speaker, I have only one question, and this is in regard to preparedness for grade 9 next year. In January 2025, Mr. Speaker, which is barely 3.5 months from now, you know, about 1.5 million students in grade 8 will be transitioning to grade 9. And this is in over 30,000 schools in Kenya. That means we need to have over 30,000 classrooms built for them. We need to have over 30,000 laboratories, and we need to have enough teachers. Is the ministry prepared for the next 3.5 months? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, I think just hold. We have very few left. And some have been repeat questions. Taitum, just take all of them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Where they overlap,
while the CS and his team are trying very hard to streamline the hiccups that there are within the ministry, and particularly with the new funding model, I would like to ask about the costing of the programs. It is very clear that where the ministry is pumping a lot of money to public universities through grants and other forms of support, most of courses, particularly the premier courses, are costing more than what is happening in private universities. For example, to train a doctor in Nairobi University.
University of Nairobi.
University of Nairobi. It is far away than training a doctor in Mount Kenya University, which is a private university. Why do we have this difference? Whereas we know that the public universities are being supported and the private universities are not being supported.
Thank you. Deco.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to raise an issue concerning COOP's placement of students, in that we have challenges where students from far-flung areas of the region are being placed all the way from Mandera and Garissa to go and do education courses, Bachelor of Education at universities in Kisumu, Eldoret.
That is how to build a nation. Is that a big...
But there is a cost implication involved in this, Mr. Speaker. You cannot have all, students being picked from far-flung areas all the way to Kisumu, yet these parents cannot afford even the university fees, cannot afford accommodation in those areas. So they should consider, because we have universities within that general area. We have Garissa University, which we can place certain students, and again, picking a student from Kisumu, he will not report to Garissa University for sure. So my suggestion will be, consider certain courses that are offered in certain universities within that locality and within that region to be placed in those universities. Otherwise, we'll have them dropping out of those, reporting to those universities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last, Martin Owino. Kiamba, you came late.
Thank you.
Okay, you'll be the last.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I represent a very rural community called Ndewa constituency. And the answer which I got as a solution for lack of access to internet cannot be tolerated. Can the CS give us an elaborate strategy for making internet be accessible to students, especially in rural setting? And can he also work with the ICT ministry to make sure that happens? Added to that, the issue of Elimu scholarships, 12 billion from 2020 to 2024. How was the selection done? Can that be broken down to constituencies?
Thank you. Kiamba, the very last.
Speaker, I think I have only two short questions. One is the fact that while we appreciate your innovativeness, because things have to change. We cannot stay the same. I was wondering what informed you when you are having the lowest band at 5%. Because when we are addressing bursaries, we know we are dealing with students who cannot pay anything. We even pay for them to the bus fare to go to school. Why don't you have those category of the invisible poor that we have been taking care of? That is my one question. The second question is, we know this country is as a paradigm shift from centralization to decentralization. And that was the major drive towards devolution. And all this was aimed at enhancing service delivery. Now we have seen with the capitation that it takes years, if not months, for schools to get capitation. If it was not for the NGDF, most of the lower schools, day schools would be closed because this capitation comes much late. I would want to understand what is the rationale or what would we really be looking for when we are trying to centralize everything, when we know the bottlenecks we have actually experienced in centralized service delivery. Thank you.
Minister, you can now answer all those very quickly.
Yes, I'll start. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll start with Dorothy. On the issue of NEMIS, it is true we have that program, but that system. But what the MTI is trying to do is not just the identification of the child, but of the means of the parents. And that is why we are combining these linkages with various other areas so that we can get them to be in the right band. And with the issue of TVET not having received any money, the TVET have already received their capitation. I think they received 4,470,000,000 just a day or two ago. So the disbursement has already been done. We are working closely with Treasury to ensure that these resources reach the schools so that they are able to run. And Treasury, even with the hard financial situation that we are in, and you know that because of the finance bill, has tried very hard to ensure that schools get resources in order not to close. So thank you very much for caring for TVET. That's much appreciated. Honorable Sunkuli, the loan interest rate is 4%. That is charged, but it is part of the issues that is going to be considered by the committee to find out whether this 4% can be reduced. And in terms of...
Yes, Ferdinand, who do you want to inform?
Well, I mentioned in passing, but it's true, my TVET has not been funded, despite the fact that I contributed. That's what I said. I contributed that TVET, but the ministry has not done its part. So we had lost. I just wanted you to explain why we have done contribution as members of parliament, but you have not put in your contribution to complete the infrastructure of this TVET.
Yes, I'm coming to your question. In fact, I was just answering Dorothy's question with respect of capitation that has not gone to schools for the students, the TVET schools. But I'm coming to the infrastructure aspects for your particular school. So I was saying it's 4%, and one of the concerns that is there is at what point should students start paying loans once they complete university studies? Is at the point where they get employment. That's the structure that we want to come up with so that at the end, you are paying what you have. And for Ferdinand, I can confirm that for your particular case, the funding has been done, and the information I have, the Kwanza TVET, yes, all the paperwork has already been done, and the funding is awaited. It is the challenge that we have with the finance bill and the resources, but the funding, all the paperwork is done for our part. Since you've contributed to it, we are aware of it, and it's not the only one. There are many others that we are struggling to ensure that we complete them so that they can become functional and utilizable. So we are on it. Paperwork is completed. We have not forgotten. And then my brother Ochanda Mweshmiwa, who trained me sometimes back in 2000 and something, if I remember, the 300,000 or so students that are in year 2 all the way to 6 are under the capitation program. That is where the 38% has already been released for them. So they are not being left out. The new funding model is only dealing with the year 1 and 2 who joined last year. So they are taken care of. They've not been left. Gachagua talks about us going back to the old model because the variables are misleading. And again, the answer is the same. The old model was not working effectively because of the lower disbursements of government, reducing from 80% to 38% this year. So that is the reason why we are on this model, which we hope we are going to be able to improve. Oyula, Honorable Oyula, the assurance that we can give you is that the system is not being tampered with, and it cannot be tampered with. What we will find out is what the cause of that error is. If it's one incident, you know, any particular IT system sometimes has hitches, and it can cause this particular move. And all that we need to do is get in there as help and find out what is the cause of this particular movement. If it is tampered with, it will leave footprints, and we are going to be able to find out if it is, then we'll get a solution for it. But as far as we are concerned, the system is not capable of being tampered with. The linkages with KRA, where the parents have no PIN numbers, and the cobbler is listed as in band 5, again, I said this could be an error related to the data that was put in. So until we look at the case individually and find out was the data that was put in correct vis-a-vis the student, then we'll be able to determine the reason of that outcome. And of course, the appeal system is available for this particular student to go ahead and amend. My brother Murugara, you talked about standardization of, is it courses?
University fees.
University fees. The university fees is determined using there is something called...
A point of order, Mr. Speaker. Because we are still unanswered, I want to request the CS to stop referring to members, like he just referred to the honorable member as my brother Murugara. You should refer to him appropriately.
Every member, Minister, is an honorable member. Whether he was your classmate or not, his honorable Murugara is not your friend for purposes of these proceedings.
I'm well guided. I think I can maybe hide behind being very new. This is my first time
go
here.
Ahead.
I'll be very careful.
Go ahead.
Honorable Murugara, the university fees is not standard because of the various other costs that are run in various universities. So there are other costs that they factor in, and in fact I can answer this question together with the question that was raised as to why some public universities' fees is slightly maybe higher than the private universities. Because of other costs, for example, related to the number of staff that some universities have, these costs are fed in and they become part and parcel of the cost of the particular program. So they are not, the short answer to that is that they are not standardized. The member for Kajiado South, we are tired of demonstrations and that the piloting was wrong. Now, the question of whether the education for primary school is truly free is a question that we've grappled with here many times because there are other costs. In fact, I remember the last time we were here, I was told that sometimes uniforms cost more than what we are paying, and therefore it is not truly free. And this is the conversation that we are saying we need to have to ensure that if we are saying the education is free, is it truly and legally free, or are there other costs that come in and make it impossible to say it is free? So it is something that the ministry is grappling with to see what is the best way to deal with that aspect of the BOM, which comes about because we do not have perhaps enough teachers in those institutions, and the BOM, the parents have to employ some teachers to support the schools. So it is something that we are dealing with, but it is also tied to the funding and the capacity of the government to ensure that we have enough teachers in each and every institution. Lelmelit, Honorable Lelmelit.
Lelmengit.
Lelmengit. We are addressing a problem with different solutions. It is true that in the committees that we have constituted, we put in a number of analysts and data statisticians to look at this model and ensure that it is as effective as possible, so that we can get it working and ensuring that the results that we'll get will be as close as possible to the reality of each individual. On the issue of the strikes that are going on, there was a strike that is taking place as we speak, which we tried to avert and we were not able to manage. They have not signed the CBA for 2021-2025. And we are at the tail end of that cycle. And there have also issues of relating to the CBA of 2017 to 2021, one or two issues pending within that CBA in implementation. And this is, again, tied down to the questions relating to availability of resources because of budgetary constraints. And again, you tie it down to our finance bill. And what we were trying to negotiate with them is to ask for more time to ensure that we can come up with an answer or come up with an amicable solution to handle the issues that they have. And we are going to have another meeting with them tomorrow to see whether we can reduce the gap that we have, and maybe they'll be able to go back to work. So we are doing something about it in the difficult situation that we are in, because we have to accept that we can't run the ministry on the basis of strikes, because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resources, and a lot of energy. Bwana Mbui, my apologies for using unparliamentary language.
He is not Bwana Mbui, he's Honorable Mbui.
Honorable Mbui, I'm sorry. Yeah, I need to go back and study this a little bit more. And the safety standards manual, we have said we are going to bring it here to ensure that we can anchor it in law, so that it can have the force of law, so that where people are making a mistake or they are not complying, they can be penalized. With respect to grade 9 preparedness, we have started the construction of the 16,000 classrooms for grade 9 that have been assessed as required for grade 9, both the laboratories and the classrooms. And we are already at various stages of completion. We have classrooms that are at 3% and others are at 95%. And we are calculating that we'll finish 11,000 classrooms probably by mid-November, and thereafter we deal with the remainder of 3,000 or 4,000. Partly, there is an amount that was supposed to come through CDF, and we were supposed to work with you to do some classrooms. We are trying to push Treasury, or work with them, not push, to ensure that that money is released to you, work with yourselves, so that we can do the 3,400 classrooms that was supposed to be done by CDF. So we are working towards achieving and ensuring that by the time we are landing in January, we have all the 16,000 classrooms ready for grade 9 students who are coming in. I think I've answered the question of Taitum of costing of private, and Honorable Taitum, costing more than private schools. Public schools costing more than private schools. And that is sometimes because the private schools are running a tight ship. They have staff that are a little bit more reduced as opposed to public universities, and that's why sometimes the cost differs. Honorable Deco, the students.
Why do you take students from Garissa to Kisumu?
Yes, why we take students from Garissa to Kisumu. The students apply for certain courses and they are placed, but where a student feels they have been placed in the wrong place or they are not able to go to Kisumu, there is in that portal a link for you to apply for intertransfer so that you can transfer back to a school perhaps that is closer to where you are. Accessibility, Honorable Owino, accessibility
but
to...
Minister, if you take that route, yes, you are going to kill the spirit of nationalism in this country. Universities are not day schools where I want to be close home. I would want to see children from Mandera in universities in Kisumu, children from Kisumu in universities in Lodwar, children from Kitui in universities in, that's how to build a nation. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was trying to avoid an issue that actually I think we need to consider, not just the students, but also university leadership, where I think in building the institutions, we should not have a problem where a university manager or university VC is not from the area of the university. We should support that. And if, as members of parliament, you give us that support, I think we'll go very far. So I agree.
Look for competence. Don't look for
competence
issues.
so that we can be able to ensure that our universities are being run competently. But we'll require, as a ministry, your support, because some of the problems that are facing the universities arise out of those policies or those pressures. And the VCs tell us they are under a lot of pressure, even to retain staff that are not doing any job in the universities, leading to bloated payrolls, leading to this problem that we have where, universities are almost going under. The LIM scholarships on the internet, Honorable Owino, let me answer and say we are, as a ministry, working and sort of partnering with the Kenya Power now that is laying the internet cable so that we can be able to do last mile connectivity to this particular school so that each school has internet. And we are thinking, what we can do to ensure that for those far-flung schools where students need the internet, what would be giving them in terms of iPads, of laptops, have bundles and have solar, and we are thinking about all that to ensure that there's no child that is disadvantaged. So it is something that is in our radar, and we are working on it to ensure that internet is accessible. On the LIMU scholarships in the last 5 years, the 12 billion, we would prepare a list and share with the House on how the distribution has been and where it has gone so that you can have sight of it. Honorable Kiama talked about why we came up with 5% for the lower cadre for Band 1. Why didn't we come with something sort of 0%, I think? I think the analysis that was done, it came up that the most vulnerable would pay a maximum of 5%. For example, in the degree, education program degree, the 5% works to 6,000 or 7,000 shillings, and it's paid in 2 terms, 3,000 in one term and 2,000 in the other term. And the student is paid an upkeep of 60,000. So based on that analysis, it was felt that even when somebody may not have completely nothing, they can actually manage to pay the 3,000 for that course. I think...
Yes, Minister, as we come to the end, I want you to I have just two issues I want to bring to your attention. The incident in Nyeri, the fire. One would have expected that by now, a fire that burns down a school, consuming and killing many, many children, there must be some criminal culpability somewhere. Either an arson or negligence on somebody who locked in the students so that they could not escape from the fire. Whichever way you look at it, there must be somebody somewhere to carry some level of criminal responsibility. And that is part of the deterrence that you can have to avoid similar incidents in future. I don't know what, as a ministry, you are doing. In the past, we used to have very quick and irrational decisions of closing down the school, canceling its license, and so on and so forth. That hasn't been done here. But investigations to show some degree of criminal responsibility and culpability is important. Number two, what brought us here, among other things, is this funding, which you have tried to explain. But you need to go and look at the issue, whatever you call it, whether it's amalgamation or whatever you call it, on management of public bursaries. From where I sit, and many members, and I've been, since we started this conversation, even governors have been calling, saying that it is a point worth following. This money comes from the same source. Everybody is administering a bursary of public resources, administration costs, corruption, thefts of this money. If you came up with a proper policy to consolidate, amalgamate, or whatever you call it, this money will go a long way in improving our education system in the country. Because as it is, these members have cases they bring to me where a parent is given a check of 15,000. The managers of their CDF take 5,000 back in some cases. There's corruption all along the way. If this money was protected, and this house is ready to give you a law to protect that money anytime you wish. And don't do it alone. We have a committee of this house that will work with you to ensure that these knee-jerk reactions that in the management of public resources come to an end so that we can be able to give this country an education system that is affordable and accessible by all. If you can look at that, I'll ask the majority leader to look at the Hansard and his team and all the members, and much sooner than later we'll recall you again. Because from where I sit, most of the issues that come to this floor are education, health, and security. Education, health, and security, all the time. And if we get those right, some of the rumbles that we see around will substantially die down. We'll come to the end of this. Yes, Lelmengit?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The CS has not answered my question.
Yes.
I need him to give me an assurance that the 5 disciplines that were advertised in Gwen TVC
Yes.
positions, we will get those 5 appointments in that institution. Thank you.
Minister, can you give the assurance? Hold on. Deco, I see you raising your hand. What is the issue? Or you are...
I'm okay, Mr. Speaker. I wasn't raising the hand for you.
Or you are stretching your hand?
I was...
That is okay.
I wanted the attention of the PS higher education.
Okay. Go on, Minister. Give Lelmengit the assurance.
Yes, it is true, Honorable Lelmet, that the 5 disciplines and 2 were posted. They are doing now rationalization, and when we find that there is a discipline that is missing a trainer, would repost a trainer there. Yeah, we're working on it. They are aware of that issue. Now, the last 2 issues, Mr. Speaker, are as follows. The reason why we've not taken action on criminal culpability of the issue of Hillside is because the investigation by the DCI is not complete. We are waiting for that report. The assurance I can give this House is that if there is anybody, including our officers, if they did not do their work, we are going to take action against them, criminal and administrative, based on the report. And that is an assurance I can give this House, and it's going to be done. And once the report is done, we can even share that report with the House. On the second issue of the amalgamation of all the bursaries, all the education funds, the whole of the 27% of our budget, all the Arambes we go to, and that this is a lot of money in the education sector. It is in billions. All the scholarships that we get from various places. It is true that this is a conversation that, together with this House, the ministry can come up with a policy. As we agreed, we have statisticians, get the right figures, do the math, and then ensure that we have the proper legal regime that can be able to protect and ring-fence those funds so that we don't have these questions of students will just wake up and go to school and payments will be done. So with your support, it is something that as a ministry, we are willing to lead, and as soon as possible, through the normal process of public participation, etc., it's something that we can do, and it's an assurance that I can give the House that I picked it up, and I'm going to start working on it, and I will share the policy or the guidelines so that we can move together. I think it is time. I think the goodwill is there. I think it's the time to have that discussion, and we can be able to achieve it. So,
there's a Kenyan who is in court in Nakuru, yes, forcing you to do that.
I mean, this is the right thing to do. We just need the goodwill from the public. We manage the backlash, then we go ahead and have this. Because education touches everybody. I contribute every day myself. You contribute. If we did that math against everything else, the funds are probably sufficient to run a completely free education in this country. But
thank you, CS. We'll now release you and your team to go back to your office. We'll go to the next order.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Speaker. Thank you, honorable members.
We are done with the minister. I've released him.
Order number 9, motion, enhancing reporting of parliamentary business on online platforms. Resumption of debate.
Who was on the floor? There's nobody on the floor. Mark Mwenje, are you keying in for this? There's no interest in the order.
Order number 10, motion, report on the consolidated fund services expenditures for the supplementary estimates 1 for the financial year 24-25. Resumption of debate.
Chairman, public debt, is he there? Was anybody on the floor on this? Next.
Order number 11, motion, public petition on funds spent contrary to the provisions of Article 223 of the Constitution. Resumption of debate.
Was there anybody on the floor? Next.
Order number 12, motion. Implementation status of reports on petitions and resolutions passed by the House.
Chairperson, Committee on Implementation. Did I see Wanjala here? Next.
Order number 13, motion. Alleged unfair trade practices by foreign investors in Kenya.
Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Trade. Next.
Order number 14, motion. Second report on employment diversity audit in public institutions.
National Cohesion and Equal Opportunity Committee. Next.
Order number 15, motion. Report of the extraordinary session of the 6th Pan-African Parliament, PAP.
Member of PAP? None. Next.
Order number 16, the Equalization Fund Administration Bill, Senate Bill number 14 of 2023, second reading.
Committee on Finance and Planning. Kimani? Not here. Next.
Order number 17, motion. Consideration of reports on financial statements of state corporations, Nyanza region.
Jack, you are ready to move?
Just 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Then we proceed, yeah.
Now, what shall we do in those 5 minutes? It is the only business that we have now. If you are ready, we give you an opportunity to move. And I encourage all members who have business in the House to come ready as if you are the one on top. Because you can see when they all collapse, we even reach you at the very bottom. So, all of our members, it's clear members are not here. That being the case, we'll adjourn the House. Yeah. Read the last one.
Order number 18, the Kenya National Library Service Bill, National Assembly Bill number 20 of 2023, second reading.
Departmental Committee on Sports and Culture. Mwenje, you are the only leadership of the House in the House. Can you communicate to your colleagues that all members who have business in the House, regardless of where they are, and clerks, you must desist from informing members that business on the order paper will not be reached. Because once business on the order paper, it's presumed that it will be reached. So that if one collapses, we must have another to come on. So Mwenje, talk to your colleagues on both sides of the House that chairmen of committees who have business must strive to be in the House at all times, regardless. Our honorable members, will you be upstanding? It is now 6:47 p.m. and it's now time to adjourn the House, and the House stands adjourned until
Owino. It's a great honor and pleasure for CPST to host our 12th webinar series. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you, particularly those who are repeat attendees. There are some